Hello, you. I don't know, man. People say I could do that voice, so I tried it. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another video. Or, if you decide to stick around, a series of videos where I'm comparing the You book to the You TV series on Netflix. I mean, each book in the You series doesn't have the same title, but obviously the first book has the same title because I just showed it to you. And speaking of the first book, it is the only book we will be covering in this video. I'll be releasing a series of videos on the rest of the series with the following books. Next book is Hidden Bodies. I'm not sure the other two books are called, but I know the final book, which is for the 5th season, For You and Only You. So that will be, I think that's a new book coming out if I'm not mistaken. So that'll be a good video to end off the series with. But if you decide to stick around for these series of videos, that's what you're going to be in for. But without further ado, let's jump into the show and the book start out similarly, with Beck walking to the bookstore and running into this guy who works there.
Hello. Do you work here?
Joe Goldberg. He's our narrator for the story, and apparently I'm putting people to sleep with my fucking audio, so I'm trying to make it a little more entertaining. Except in the show, he comes up. Except in the show, she comes up to him in an aisle and asks about a book, whereas in the book, he's at a register, checking people out, and he checks out some asshole before Beck. No, I'm not gonna do it. And just to compare the two mediums, it's way more sexual from Joe's POV describing Beck in the first, few chapters of the story. It's just, imagining what he would do to her in the bookstore, if nobody was there. In the show, this interaction is just Beck talking to Joe and then going up to the counter to get her book from the bookstore. But in the book, it's a couple of pages of Joe fantasizing about what he would do to Beck sexually, imagining what would happen if she just didn't leave the bookstore. When they get up to the counter, an important difference comes up. So, there's this guy who works at the bookstore, Ethan. He works at the bookstore in the beginning of the show. But in the book, he doesn't start working there until Joe has to find a new employee after the old guy, Curtis, gets fired. And that'll be relevant to the story eventually in the book. But going back to the show, when Joe comes home, there's this arguing couple and the kid sitting outside. His name is Paco, and Joe kind of takes him under his wing this season. Paco and his mom and Ron, the abusive boyfriend, are not in the book. And that's all I'll say on it right now because it'll become more important later. I don't really want to spoil important plot points in the book. But in the show, Joe gives Paco a book and a sandwich that he was going to eat and goes inside. And off rip, this just shows that the show is trying to humanize Joe in a way that the book really just isn't trying to do, because it doesn't give him this relationship with Paco or any sort of redeeming qualities about him. He's just kind of a dick through and through. But in the show and the book, Joe goes back to his apartment and immediately begins stalking this woman. This woman who he met in the bookstore, none other than Guinevere Beck. In the show and kind of in the book, it kind of seems like he's stalking to the extent that a normal person would. Just kind of looking at social media and finding out, interesting hobbies and siblings just through, social media and Facebook posts. Until he starts going to her house. In both mediums. Yeah, he said,
"The next thing our little friend the internet gave me was your address."
And watches her for days, and in the book it's actually weeks. He takes different outfits from different professions and wears them to stalk her, on a daily basis for multiple weeks, and didn't get caught. And in the book, he definitely does it for multiple days, and it might be multiple weeks. I don't know how the time frame works, but he only does it a few times, and we only see it a few times. But in the show and book, he masturbates outside while watching Beck masturbate. Yeah, yeah. In the show, he actually helps an old lady with her groceries right after he takes his hand off his dick, and with the dick hand, he grabs the bag of groceries, if you notice, if you look closely. But he watches her and watches her and watches her, and he finds another guy walking up on her doorstep. God forbid she have a life, not knowing that she has a stalker that has clearly compartmentalized a portion of his mind to be with her forever. And she has a guy coming over, and his name is Benji, and his reaction to this in the show is,
"You waste of hair."
And he then proceeds to watch them both have sex, and then after stalk the guy she's with, Benji. A rich artisanal soda company owner who's really just a dickhead. But Joe in the book thinks he's so much of a dick that in the first about half of the book, it's just spent with him torturing Benji in the cage, where it's only the first 2 or so episodes of the show. But speaking of this cage, we get to see what it is, where it is, who it is, how it is, and why it is in the first episode of the show. Paco goes to the basement of the bookstore with Joe, and it starts out as a rare bookstore storage, this cage. And only by the end, it doesn't end up becoming a trap to kill people, you know. But after we see the cage in the show, Joe walks Paco home and we see Ron, the abusive boyfriend. Ron tells Joe to keep away from Paco, and again, there's none of this in the book. The next day, Joe breaks into Beck's apartment after calling in a fake gas leak and telling the maintenance people that he, her boyfriend, holy fuck, this man's creepy as shit, was there to clean shit up. Then he proceeds to go through her laptop, her emails, and steal some of her panties for good measure, and just about every other creepy thing you can expect someone to do who just went through all of this trouble to get into your house. But then Beck comes back home unexpectedly, and Joe has to hide in the shower. And in the show and the book, he says,
I'm not worried. I've seen enough romantic comedies to know guys like me are always getting in jams like this.
Just like all the romantic comedies, she finds a reason not to take a shower and turns off the water, leaving the bathroom, and this saves our boy Joe for now. This goes down about the same way in the book. But while he was in her apartment, Joe finds out that Beck's dad overdosed, and now she writes about him, which becomes important later. But most importantly, Joe finds emails confirming that Beck has been talking about him, and she says she's unsure about him, but he seems genuine. And with that, Joe is fully obsessed, as if he wasn't already, and he follows her to an open mic where Beck gets drunk and kind of bombs. And in the show and book, she leaves this place to head to the subway station to go home, and in both mediums, he's stalking her, and he says,
Beck, you're too drunk to be alone. What if some sicko had followed you down here?
There's a guy in the subway tunnel screaming engine, engine number 9 until Beck eventually falls onto the tracks. And conveniently, someone other than that guy screaming saw her fall onto the tracks. And whether he was stalking her or not, it's time to save her fucking life and get the meet cute that he wanted until she threw up directly on him. This interaction was not described like this in the book. I mean, he just helped her off the tracks, no romantic position in vomit. But in both, Joe hails a cab and almost reveals that he's stalking her.
But then the world wouldn't know your poetry.
How do you know I write poetry?
But he saves it and says, doesn't every great writer in New York write poetry? And I mean, come on, Beck. But they get back to Beck's apartment and Benji escorts Beck out of the cab. And we're following along with the book still here when Joe asks for Beck's number, but she doesn't have her phone on her. And she doesn't give out her number anyway, so she gives him her email. But of course the reason she doesn't have her phone is because Joe went ahead and took that off of her. Just swiped it off of her. So he goes on home and goes through her phone because she has no damn password in both the book and the show. Beck, what are we doing? Now, in the show, we get back to Joe and Paco, and as you know, in the book, there is no Paco, so no Paco to get back to. But my explanation for why the book has no Paco is just because the Benji in the cage torture scene, or sequence, or series of chapters was so long. But after Joe talks to Paco in the show, and after nothing in the book, we just cut straight to it, Joe is pretending to be a big soda owner to convince Benji to meet up in the basement of the bookstore. And when they meet up in the show, Joe just sneaks him with a brick in the basement and knocks him out. But in the book, they actually have a sit-down conversation with each other, and they're just like getting to know each other and Benji's trying to like talk artisanal soda to him. And Joe puts Xanax in his water, and when he starts like getting woozy and tired, he punches him in the face to knock him out. Yeah, kind of crazy difference, man. But in both, he drags Benji into the cage, and that's the end of the first episode. Well, actually, no. Right before the reveal, Benji is alive in the cage, and Beck brings a thank you gift to Joe in the store for saving her life. And it's a book with a little love note in it. Joe opens the second episode still stalking. Accurate to the book, he never really stops stalking. In creative ways in both mediums, though. Beck has this professor that's trying to sleep with her, and we don't see it in the book because it's fully from Joe's perspective, and I'll talk about it when it comes up. Joe is doing a lot of talking to Paco, and that is replaced in the book with him having a long conversation with Benji in the cage. Even in the show, he does spend a lot of time talking to Benji in the cage, but I mean, not as much as the book, to be honest. It's just like so much of the story in the book is dedicated to him and Benji in the cage. In the book, he quizzes him on books over and over for days, and doesn't even give him an access to a quick bump like he does in the show of like his fucking cocaine or whatever he's addicted to. Even if it was in the show just in order to send out a tweet to everyone saying that he was just wasted somewhere. He just doesn't ever send out photo tweets in the book. But in the show, they actually adapted something directly from the book where Joe asks Benji to take 3 club sodas and tell him which one is his. He says both in the show and in the book that none of them taste like his. They all taste like cheap drugstore soda, but Joe reveals that they're all his. And he starts begging to be let out again. But Joe just leaves. Meanwhile, Beck and the people close to Benji are starting to suspect that he is missing. But in the book, he goes like 16 chapters sending out fake tweets as Benji as he puts him through quiz after quiz on books. Speaking of Beck and her friends, her best friend's name is Peach, and she's toxic and annoying, but also pretty creepy in both the book and the show. She often manipulates Beck to do what she wants, but Beck doesn't really see it that way yet. But Joe, knowing how her interactions go because he stalks her, thinks he knows how bad Peach is for her and doesn't want her around. In the show, Beck and her friends are talking about having dinner with this professor that wants to sleep with her, and this ends with her going through with it. He ends up coming on to her, and she's obviously not okay with this, and he threatens to release her from the TA job if she doesn't, consent. And we know this is happening because our main man Joe is watching from the background. So when the professor leaves and gives Beck that ultimatum, that boy Joe is automatically ready to slide in and swoop in for his love. And Beck calls him while he's in the restaurant, so he has to run out and act like he wasn't there and accept the call and says that he's going to be there in 20 minutes even though he's already there, and then wait 20 minutes and walk back in. I'm sure some of y'all can probably relate to that. He gets to the place, and they talk about Benji being missing for a second in the show because it's assumed that he's getting shit-faced in a different state like he always does, even though he's in the cage. Beck wants Joe to come to this party and meet her friends, most notably Peach since it's her house. And I'm going along with this episode because it pretty much follows along with the book, so just keep that in mind. This happened over a longer period of time, but it's still happening in the same order. They go to Peach's party and Joe steals a book from her library in both mediums, and in the show there's this girl who asks him about Candace, the ex-girlfriend of Joe who just went missing after they broke up. The girl was going to say more, but Beck cuts her off and they leave. This is how we find out about Joe's ex-girlfriend Candace in the show. Whereas in the book, Joe just kind of narrates about her in the 3rd or so chapter, and we just know that Candace is his ex-girlfriend, and that it didn't end well. Show Beck friend zones Joe, and they leave the party, and Joe takes Beck home. Then he talks to Paco at his apartment in the show only, obviously because there's no Paco in the book, and he actually tells him a crucial piece of information that evening. Joe tells Paco to hide the book from Ron, that he needs to put it in the ceiling. Tiles move easily in the bathroom, so it's going to be a good hiding spot. Keep that in mind. Joe then goes to bed and wakes up the next morning having forgotten about Benji, and this is how he's driven crazy in the show, but whereas in the book, he's broken down over time. But once he's in this state in the show, he tries one last thing to be let out. He gives Joe this storage locker filled with all of this stuff, but most notably a video he has of them killing a guy, him and his frat friends. And he hopes that this will be enough to buy his freedom, and Joe seems to think that it will be. For now. Beck then comes to the store and thanks Joe for giving her advice on how to stand up to her professor, which, yeah, he did that while she invited him to the restaurant. He was doing that while he was talking to her. But Beck got her housing back, so she kisses him thank you, and that settles it. Joe is too scared of what Benji could do to Beck and wants to protect her, so he puts peanuts in the maple latte after hearing that Benji was allergic to them, and in the book and in the show, he thought,
Could have gone either way. He's lied about so many things. Who knew? The peanut allergy was real.
Joe and Beck are now going out on dates in the show, and in the book, this is where the show and the book kind of even pace, in my opinion. I think a lot happened in the book between the 1st and 2nd episodes of the show, but I think now it's a little bit more even pace. From chapters 1 to 20, he has Benji in the cage. There's only 50 chapters in the book, man. Like, he has Benji in the cage for a fat minute. Most of this time, it's not like a bunch of other plot lines in the story happening while he has Benji in the cage. It's like he just has Benji in the cage, and he is telling us in vivid detail why he deserves to be in there. And it's pretty fucking invigorating, man. I would really recommend reading the book if you're a fan of the show. But Joe is all happy because Benji is no longer in their lives because he killed him. And Beck seems to be happy. This is pretty fucked up seeing that he killed him, but it gets so much worse, man. It gets so much worse than this. He's trying to find out how to dispose of Benji's body, and he decides on cremation. So he reads up on how to do it, which, hey, and at least he works at the bookstore. In the show, in the basement, he turns the AC all the way up to keep Benji's body cold so it doesn't start smelling up. But in the book, he has a car, and he just carries the body in his trunk. In the show, he also does have a car, but I think it's Mr. Mooney's car. In the show, I'm pretty sure this is his car. But Joe picks up Beck while he has Benji in the trunk of the car dead, and he makes comments in his head about how there are 3 people in the car. Going back to the show, Beck is hooking up with random guys, and Joe is watching, creepy as ever, still just across the street fucking jerking it. And in both mediums, he needs fire starter materials, and in the show, he asks Paco, the little boy, to go get them for him. He also needs other chemicals to decompose the body, which he asks him to get as well. We also get a little show-exclusive character development from Beck, where we see her writing class and her struggling to write, and one of her random guys she was sleeping with broke her bed. Joe is watching this and suggests that he takes her out in Mr. Mooney's Buick, Mr. Mooney being the owner of the bookstore. She says yes, and they head to IKEA to get a new bed for her. And Benji is in the trunk of the car in the book, which just imagine. They get to IKEA, and another difference in the book from the show is that in the show, they start getting freaky in the store, but Beck stops them and says that's not what she wanted. But in the book, they fully just have sex in the IKEA. But before they get freaky in the show, they had a conversation about her being remarkable and that she's a good writer, and, you know, that's all cool. While they're leaving IKEA with the bed, Joe gets a call from Ethan at the store saying that the fuse box is down, and the electrician can't get to the fuse box because
It's in the basement with a dead body.
of course, in the book, he already has the body in his trunk, so this is a non-issue, but there's also no Ethan to begin with. It'd be Curtis, so this is just not going to happen in the book either way. But back to the show. Joe helps Beck build the bed, and she tells him that she likes him. They talk about her writing some more, and she talks about her dad and how he died. Except, spoiler alert, he's not actually dead. But they start to get freaky on the new bed, and in both the show and the book, Peach comes in the door and interrupts, saying that she's got a chronic bladder disease and she needs to go to the emergency room, which I don't know if she got there, if she needs a ride to the emergency room, but maybe her apartment's just in walking distance. Who knows? But Beck offers up Joe to take Peach to the hospital. And at this point, to solve the Benji situation, Joe has now put him in the trunk. So now Benji is in the trunk of the car, and Peach actually gets in the car and says that she cannot handle the smell because it's a fucking dead body. I mean, I honestly can't blame her, but like, she's being extra annoying about it, eventually getting out of the car, saying that she just can't handle it and that she'll walk to the emergency room. And Beck goes with her, so Joe is just sent home, where he is greeted by police and Ron. They have the list of the fire starter things and the dissolving chemicals that he was getting to cremate Benji, and he talks his way out of it somehow. He says he's using it for grilling and gardening, and tells the cops that he gives money to Paco to get food because he seems neglected, and that kind of sent them away. None of this in the book, by the way, because, you know, you probably get it by now. But later on in both mediums, Joe heads out to burn the body in the woods, and for dramatic effect in the show, Beck calls him as he's setting up the body to burn. And some people walk right up before he gets the body lit, and he tries to cover up the body and sets a bonfire, and this, of course, works. And they leave unsuspectingly. In the book, he didn't come across any problems, but, you know, I guess that's not crazy enough for a show made after Dexter. But on his phone conversation with Beck, he says she's sending mixed signals and just being rude to her overall about the whole Peach thing. And this results in her not talking to him or calling back for a while. This happens in the book too, but seemingly for no reason. They just kind of stop talking for a few days, and Joe gets way more mopey than he does in the show. He's talking to Curtis and saying things in his head like life is meaningless without Beck, and he sees why people jump off bridges. Like, fuck, Joe, you went on a few dates. You're not entitled to this woman. A few days later in the show, it's like a few weeks in the book, she comes back to the bookstore and apologizes about the Peach thing and says that she doesn't really know him. And here's where, in both mediums, Joe shows her the cage. But in the book, bro, holy shit, he sets up dinner for her in the cage. He locks them in there with the food, they eat it, and have sex. Like, damn, man, this is like the first time. Dude, I would not, but that's just me, though. Maybe I'm crazy. But that doesn't happen in the show. He just shows her the books. And after this, Beck goes to talk to Peach, and she says that she thinks Joe is good for her. And Peach just basically says, whatever, go for it. So she does, and they have sex that night. And in the book and the show...
What was that? 8 seconds?
We literally get this line in the show and in the book. In the show, this is so bad we switched to Beck's whole POV. We switched to her thoughts to hear how bad this was, but also to find out that the captain is texting her, which we'd know anyway because Joe is looking at her text on the old phone that he has of hers. But the captain is texting her confirming that they're meeting and sending her money. Joe thinks that she's texting another guy and leaves. Spoiler alert, again, she's texting her dad. So she's getting ready to lie to everyone, including Joe, to say that she's going on a writing retreat, but she's actually going to a festival with her dad. And in both mediums, while she's getting ready, Joe is getting ready too, to follow her there. And in the show, Beck starts masturbating in the hotel room and gets interrupted by her dad. But in the book, Joe is already in the motel room next door while she gets in, and while she masturbates, he listens and jerks off to the sound. Holy fuck, man, this book is crazy. But in the show, he is also in the room next door, but it doesn't get this wild. Beck walks out to meet this guy, and we find out that it's her dad. But in the book, Beck asks this guy multiple times for cigarettes, which I find it funny to maybe throw off the reader that it's not her dad. But Beck and her dad, that is in fact her dad, head to the festival, and Joe casually is just watching her the whole time, following her there. Beck's dad has a new family, and they show up, and they low-key terrorize Beck. And in the book, Beck goes from this festival and takes a ferry boat home, and Joe hops on this ferry boat and watches her successfully without being seen. Until the very end where they're getting off the boat and her stepmother ran into Joe and told Beck. Whereas in the show, Beck never leaves the festival and Peach goes to the bookstore looking for Joe and realizes that he must be with Beck. Beck then sees Joe and hits an iconic line.
Joe?
Beck, what are you doing here?
But he manages to play it off since Beck was also lying about where she was going. It makes sense that he would not know that she was going to be there. But then he feels bad and tells her that he did know that she was going to be there, and it doesn't throw her off. And I don't know how it doesn't throw her off, but he keeps talking and says that he wanted to leave her more satisfied than 8 seconds, which, fair enough. So he found her by using the tweet that she posted earlier, just explaining his stalking fully. Joe then meets Beck's dad, so then she has to explain to him that he's not dead, obviously, but he almost died when she was 12, and then survived, then abandoned her, and now her family, years later, is dealing with all of the baggage that comes with that. And that's in both mediums, and I think it's very good character development for Beck and why she's like this with men specifically and attracted to damaged men, which she even states in the second episode. The book and the show's events are lining up pretty well at this point, but stay tuned, something else is coming up. Beck comes over to Joe's apartment unexpectedly, and in the book they have a much less sexual encounter this time, which is interesting. But in both mediums they're talking and then they're not talking and moving around the room, and Joe is sneakily hiding all of the mementos that he's stolen from her apartment and all of the shit that he's gotten from his stalking. But goddamn, man, he's got bras, panties of hers, he's got shirts. How is Beck not wondering where all of her shit just goes missing to? But he manages to hide all the stuff he stole, and in the show we only see them at the apartment for one night. But in the book, the next morning, Beck gets up and takes a shower, and Joe has to literally take the towel of hers off of the bathroom door without her noticing while she's in the shower. Man, this book, man. And he pulls it off. Also, with a little bit of further review of the book, I realized that a lot of these events are out of order, but they still all happen, so I'm trying to convey them to you in the order of the show to make it a little bit easier of a timeline to follow. But that being said, episode 5 starts out with the events that line up from the book after their first night at Joe's apartment, which ended with no sex in the book, but it did in the show. And then they have that 8-second sex, and then that's when they fall into that little routine.
Always the same, but never stay. Sex. Showers. More sex.
But there's just no sex in that routine in the book. And Book Joe is actually low-key mad that he's doing all this for no sex in the book, which is funny because when he finally has it, it's like 8 seconds. And it's like, damn, man, you gotta perform if you're talking all that shit. Joe creates a date for Beck in the show with a horse-drawn carriage, and this is lifted straight from the book where they actually go on this date. But in the show and in the book, it's interrupted by Peach. But in the book, it's interrupted by Peach while they're actually on the date and they're in the carriage, and then they get a call from Peach. But in the show, they get the call from Peach before they even get to go on this date. But Peach is going through a crisis that Beck needs to attend to. But this leads Joe to doing something that he does way later in the book, which is he starts stalking Peach. He goes on jogs with her and follows loosely for weeks in both mediums, and he follows her all day long. The next day, she comes into the bookstore trying to set up Beck with her writer guy in hopes that he can publish some of her work. Peach says that he likes nice parties and asks Joe more like tells him, to clean up the place for a book-themed party. Obviously, for Beck, he'll do anything, so party is on. And the only two things that come from this party are the writer taking some of Beck's writing and this line from Peach.
Beck tell you I started jogging?
Fun. Runner's high is better than sex. And for some, may last longer.
Touche, bitch.
Joe doesn't like that comment so much that he takes her laptop back and goes through it, only to find pictures of Beck on the computer. He thought it was blackmail at first, but then he realized that there were too many pictures, and she must be obsessed. She was obsessed with Beck. Well, she was obsessed with Beck, too. Speaking of two, my girl Beck now has 2 stalkers. 2! And she thinks these are her closest people in her life, her best friend and her boyfriend, or her boy toy, or whatever the fuck Joe is to her at this point. And they're just pictures of Beck from all over the years on the laptop. And it's just goddamn, Peach. Why not at least recent photos? Some of these pictures that you have here, she's probably a minor in. Cut to Joe at the bookstore in the show, and we cut to Peach at Joe's apartment looking for her laptop because it's missing. And of course, Joe stole it, and she's at his apartment to check, and it's not there because Joe never took it home. He left it at her house, and Joe's cover is again saved by subverting the conversation to the thought that Peach might have a stalker. She says that it's not the first time, if it is, so his story works. And even better because she does have a stalker. It's Joe! But after Beck realizes that the writer guy was just trying to sleep with her and not publish any of her work, she leaves and gets upset at Peach for setting her up with that guy, knowing that. They argue, and Beck retreats to none other than Joe's apartment, where she gets a call from Peach. Warning here, I'm about to mention suicide, so any of you not comfortable with that can skip to this time frame right here. It'll be on screen. Peach took a bunch of pills attempting to take her own life and called Beck, having assumedly dealt with this before, based on how she reacted. Beck and Joe rush to Peach's house to help her. Beck makes her throw up while Joe gets nasal spray, and while getting it, Joe sees that Peach logged all the pills she took, and Peach told Joe that he can't prove that she wrote all that down, basically faking all of this, but Beck is believing it fully and staying with her all night, and tells Joe that this is important and this has happened before, so when she needs Beck, she really needs Beck. And Joe seems to understand and says he basically can't win because there's too much history between them. Which is kind of a crazy message to get from your friend struggling with depression. To each their fucking own. I mean, I guess she was kind of faking it, but fuck, man. Keeping up with Paco and his story with Joe, he had a conversation with him about protecting his mom and how he wants to hurt Ron, but Joe tells him not to, but we'll see him walking into the apartment with pills. Assumingly, he's going to try to use them on Ron. The next day, Joe goes out jogging after Peach. Once again, I'm going along with the show. If I was going along with the book, this actually happened before the 8-second sex and the thing with Beck's dad, but he runs after her, and I'm going to read it the way it happens in the book, because instead of hitting her in the head with a rock like he does in the show, just listen. This is it. I summon all my strength and I charge at her and slam her bony body into the ground. She slams, but the sound cuts off as her head thuds against a rock. She's out. Cold. He tackled her ass to the ground, bro. He fucking body slammed her into the ground and her head landed on a rock. He did not hit her with a rock. He hit her into a rock on the ground. That's not funny. That's not funny. Why are you laughing at that? But in both mediums, he has this little inner monologue to himself that I think is funny.
Shit! Detectives are real and DNA is a thing, and I just hit that girl with a rock.
It's almost like in both mediums, he didn't expect for hitting her in the head, or in the book's case, to pushing her into a rock, like tackling her to the ground. He didn't expect that to fucking... Well, actually, he thinks she's dead, but, I mean, knock her out really is the case here.
How many guys are willing to do anything for the person they love? Honestly, Beck, you're lucky to have me.
And ending that off with, honestly, Beck, you're lucky to have me? Holy fuck, this writing is good in the worst of possible ways. Joe gets back home and sees Paco with Ron knocked out in the hallway. He gave him too many sleeping pills, and now he's fully out. So Joe tells Paco to leave, and he resuscitates Ron. And Ron, doesn't like that very much and beats the ever-living shit out of Joe. You see, here's a little detour of things that happen in the book. Joe does get beat up here, but not by Ron. So, let me set the stage. Curtis, as you know, was Joel's old bookstore employee until he fired him for not doing his job. So, to get back at him and his friends pull through with Obama masks, like Barack Obama masks, like the president of the U.S., And they wear those masks and break into the bookstore and beat up Joe. And that's how he gets beat up in the book. In the book, it's pretty funny how humiliating the detail is that they go into about how he gets beaten to a pulp. I take it like a man, and they pound me like I'm a motherfucker. Like I literally fucked their mothers. My face is mashed in blood and saliva. It's possible that my right eye is no longer functioning. Finally, the attack ends and I am not a man right now. Just a collection of pulsing wounds. I open the eye that still works. The smallest Obama swipes my new Gap hat off the counter and pumps his fist. And this is when you recognize that it's Curtis, dude. This is just... It's pretty good, bro. I think it's pretty good writing. Joe's got bad karma in both either way. And yet, in both, he comes to see Peach and brings her a balloon to apologize for attacking her. And in both, Peach makes him take it back. But in the book, it just starts an argument between Joe and Beck. In the show, she just asks him to take it back and leave. And on his way out, he sees 2 first-class tickets to Paris and assumes that they're for Peach and Beck to leave New York. And as Joe thinks, take her away from him. Later in the day, Joe tells Beck that Peach is in love with her, and she leaves angrily, but thanks him for being honest. Beck and Peach are going on a retreat now, via request from Peach, and you know what that means. Joe's going with, whether they know it or not. He gears up and gets on the road, and in the show, a deer jumps out in the middle of the road and causes him to crash. In the book, though, it's the dead of winter, and the streets are just really icy, and he ends up hydroplaning and crashing a few miles from where Beck and Peach are staying. And he has to walk the rest of the way in the snow. Keep in mind, he doesn't have to, right? He doesn't have to because he doesn't have to stalk her, but he chooses to. In the show, however, he just crashes, and he wakes up in the morning with injuries, and he hallucinates his ex Candace next to him. And in the book, this is where we hear about how Joe actually, spoiler alert, killed Candace. It wasn't my fault that Candace followed me down to the water's edge. And it wasn't my fault that I picked her up and held her down in the water and watched her pass on to the great beyond. She wanted to be there, or she wouldn't have gone down with me. She knew that she was killing me, and she knew that I was not the type to go down without a fight. So yeah, he killed her, he drowned her. That's how he killed her in the book. And this is another spot where the show and the book diverge a bit. And I said Joe crashes a few miles from the house, so he just left the car in the woods and walked the rest of the way. But in the show, he's farther away, so he keeps driving, and after crashing, he gets pulled over. And he's able to convince the officer that he's rich and gives him a fake name to let him go. And the officer's name is Officer Nico, who is also in the book, but we'll get to that. The camera is about to die, so we are going to say goodbye. The camera is back alive, so now we will surely thrive. Joe drives to the house in the show without any problems, and walks in the book without any trouble. He looks around outside in both before finding his way inside. He then proceeds to do what he does best, and stalk them both. And conveniently for him, Peach is being very manipulative and supporting Joe's suspicion that Peach is trying to steal her away. But there's only so much talking that you can do from the stalker's position. We see a creepy scene in all aspects of Peach stalking Beck while she's in the bath, and Joe stalking them both. Like, fire! And with that statement in both the show and the book, he pisses in a jar. And, well, in the book, it's a mug, but, you know, fucking same difference. Now, in the show, Joe stays at the house until the next morning and just hides out. But in the book, he gets out of there late at night. And unlucky for Book Joe, that means he misses being under the bed for when Peach tries to come on to Beck, and for when Peach and this random guy get it on while Joe's under the bed. Peach also shows Beck the tickets to Paris, confirming that she does want to take her to Paris, and Beck says she'll think on it. But Book Joe leaves and goes to the backyard of the pool house of one of their neighbors and sleeps there. He is woken up by a cop named Officer Nico, who asks him his name, and Joe gives him the same fake name, Spencer Hewitt, that he gives the cop in the show. And he does that because the name Spencer Hewitt was on the hat that he stole from Benji. But going back along with the book, Officer Nico sees Joe's head wound and asks to take him to the ER. Wanting to get out of there anyway to not be seen by Beck or Peach, he agrees. So at this point in the book, he's in a cop car on the way to the hospital, while in the show, he's still right there in that house. The next morning in the show, Beck says that she's not comfortable with Peach coming on to her like she did the previous night. And Peach says it was nothing, and Beck says that she knows her parents wouldn't be accepting if she's gay, and then she gets upset, and they get into an argument resulting in Beck calling an Uber and leaving the house. In the show, this leaves Joe and Peach alone in the house, but in the book, Joe's still in the hospital, so let's update that. Book Joe is in the hospital being treated by these rural-ass townspeople, and they're helping him out hella. Officer Nico actually says that they found his car and they got it towed, and hopefully they'll have it fixed by the time he gets discharged from the hospital. So we get Joe having a conversation with the nurse until he's discharged from the ER, and then he gets back to the car, then heads back to the house. And in the book, it's on a beach, and Beck has already left. So now we connect back with our two mediums, with Joe and Peach alone at the house. In the show, Peach sneaks Joe while he's tweaking out in a concussion, and he wakes up to her holding the gun on him. But they talk and talk until she finds out he was the one who attacked her in the park. And she assumes that Joe did all that other shit that he 100% did do, like stealing her book and her laptop and, breaking into her apartment. Then she starts piecing together other things, like the fact that he killed Benji because he's wearing his watch. And that's when he starts getting desperate and starts rage baiting her to get angry, and it works. He runs outside and she tries to shoot him and hits him in the leg, seemingly. She checks to see if he's alive, and he revives, grabbing her leg and taking her to the ground. She drops the gun, and the rest is history, as the camera pans up and we hear one singular gunshot in the background. In the book, I'll just read the description of how Joe kills Peach here, because it's nothing like this. She's running on the beach and Joe sneaks her from behind again. She passes me, swoosh, and I leap out of my foxhole like a jack in the box, and I run after her. She doesn't hear me. She's fearless on this beach. I grab her by the ponytail. Before she could even scream, I ram her into the sand. Her mouth is in the sand, and Elton won't stop singing, sitting like a princess perched in her electric chair. I don't know this Elton John song, and I pick up the rock in my pocket. She squirms her head to the side, and her eyes are more beautiful than I realized. And she recognizes me and spits, "You." So you see, she doesn't even know. They don't have any sort of conversation in the book. She might be the strongest woman I have ever known, and though her last words are spoken, she's still struggling, gurgling. Her skin flares, Nantucket red, and all that exercise instilled her with a superhuman strength, a lung capacity that boggles my mind. I don't blame her for fighting, because she was raised by bigoted, hateful monsters. She never celebrated her life, and I think that's why she musters the strength. Those little legs still quiver. To maximize her last moments on Earth, her fingertips reach my arm. It's too late. Peach. Oh, shit. It's too late, Peach. Her eyeballs sail north, up to the top of her head, and we could all learn something from an untimely, tragic death. What a danger, blaming other people for your problems. What a waste of a life. This nigga Joe is crazy. Then in both mediums, Joe writes a note from Peach after he kills her, and since I can't play the whole clip from the show, I'll read it from the book. Beck, I need to go away. Lately when I run, it's like Virginia Woolf is running with me. She said, I thought how unpleasant it is to be locked out, and I thought how it is worse, perhaps, to be locked in. She was right. It's worse to be locked in, waiting for someone who isn't coming. Much worse. Enjoy the cottage. I love you, Beckalicious. Bye. Peach is. Joe has now murdered 2 people over the course of the show that we know about, and then, one other on the side, and it seems like he's covering it up perfectly. After leaving the Salinger house in the show, Joe goes to Paco's mom, Claudia, to get patched up because he did get grazed in the leg by that bullet. Because he did get grazed in the leg by that bullet. After this, Beck texts Joe and says Peach is dead, and I feel so bad for Beck here. We see them coming back from the funeral in the show, and Joe comforting her and asking him to stay with her because she clearly needs someone, but she genuinely only needs someone because Joe is causing her grief. This is the episode and part in the book where we get introduced to Dr. Nicky, the therapist. Except Beck talks about him early in the season and in the book in passing, so he's been established as her therapist, but Beck has been relying on therapy since Peach died, and the way episode 7 of the show starts is a jump forward in time to Beck and Joe being broken up and Joe in therapy with Dr. Nicky wondering why. We then go back to right after Peach died. He says in the show that the first month was intimate between him and Beck, and then it became closed off, and he wonders where things went wrong. Dr. Nicky then breaks the ice and asks him to talk about when things were good, and we see Joe and Beck being in as cute of a relationship as you can be in considering the circumstances. And this is where both in the show and in the book he suggests that Beck work at the bookstore because she got fired from her yoga studio job. Beck accepts this offer and now she works for Joe. And in both mediums, they are now working with Ethan because Curtis in the book has been fired at this point. You know, y'all get it. But Joe keeps talking to Dr. Nikki and they seem to be connecting. Joe says in his inner monologue that there is a problem with his relationship with Beck and it's sitting right in front of him, aka the therapist. But we'll get into that later. Joe in both mediums creates a fake identity for himself, and in the book it's Dan Fox, son of Paula Fox and Dan Brown, the two authors that they reference earlier on in the book. And in the show it's Paul, just Paul. And he's gay and with a man named Ronaldo, which is just Beck, obviously. Nikki asks when Joe, aka Paul, started seeing the first cracks with Ronaldo, aka Beck. He says it was good having her at work, but she wasn't good at her job. This lines up with the book. And he tells Beck that she has to come in on time, and she says that she's having vivid dreams about Peach. And Joe slips up yet again.
I've been having really vivid dreams about Peach.
I'm sorry about that.
It's not your fault, it's just...
But she says the only good thing in her life right now is therapy, which is what she says in the book, but Joe takes suspicion from her saying that. In both mediums, Joe heads back to his apartment at the end of the day, and in the show, Paco's mom has a nurse that stays in her apartment and keeps Ron away named Karen Minty, and she's a black lady. In the book, however, Joe meets Karen Minty on a subway, and she's a white girl and very sexually forward, unlike her show counterpart. But in both mediums, their first interaction is the same, which is nice because it's good. But in the show, she just goes inside, whereas in the book, they have sex on the subway. Damn, Joe. The subway? Like the fucking, like the seats, man. Like you're gonna have your bare ass cheeks on them subway seats. But after their first time having sex, in both mediums,
I love you, Joe.
Joe has sex with Karen later, but he's still with Beck at this point, so not now. And in the book, Joe narrates that he wouldn't be surprised if she was being for real because most girls go fucking insane for the first few minutes after sex. That's a direct quote from the book, even though I'm not reading it from the book. So like, I don't know, man. I'm out of words. Book Joe's out of pocket. We understand this. Back to the show, Beck made Joe dinner in the cage, and it's like the early scene from the book, but no sex. Seems like in the show they're much more focused on character development because while having dinner in the cage, unlocked, unlike the book, Beck and Joe have a nice conversation where Beck is able to open up about Peach for the first time since Joe, the guy she's opening up about this to, killed her. Just reminding y'all. But she says the things about Peach might be coming up because Beck's birthday is coming up and Peach is very serious about birthdays. Joe wants to go big for her birthday again this year, so things feel like the same, but Beck says that she'd rather keep it low-key, and Joe agrees until he talks to Lynn, one of Beck's other friends, and she says that he has to go big on this party because whether she says it or not, Beck needs this and she does too. And this convinces Joe to throw a book-themed surprise party where everyone comes in as their favorite literary character. This is all being told from Joe's perspective in the therapist's office in the show, and in the same in the book. And we cut back to Joe and Dr. Nikki, and Joe says,
"Because you threw him a surprise party?"
No, because that's when I realized he was cheating on me with his therapist.
Joe is heading to the bookstore with a cake that says everything ship, because that's their fake little inside joke name for their relationship. They're playing Scrabble and they're only doing fake words, and Joe came up with everything ship. He gets there and it's going well, but Beck is late, and they surprise Blythe thinking it's Beck, and that's when Ethan sets his sights on Blythe. And they have a really cute, if not incredibly fast-moving relationship going on at this point in the book, and we will soon see them get together in the show. Beck finally shows up and gets mad at Joe because she wanted a quiet and small gathering. She says she appreciates the gesture but can't go to parties like everything is fine. Joe says she's been hard to read lately. Beck asks what he means and Joe asks where she was. She hesitates and says her therapy session ran long, and then goes on to say that her and Dr. Nikki were
making some headway.
Beck then says she went on a walk, and Joe asks why she smells like alcohol, and Beck says it's because she sat down in a bar trying to work through shit, and Joe asks why she didn't just respond to his text, and she says she lost track of time. So this nigga gets on his knees and begs her to tell him the truth, but after begging doesn't work, he asks to see her phone, and she says fine, but if he does this, there's no trust between them, and if they don't have trust, they have nothing. So Joe doesn't check it, but Beck still leaves. But we're back to the therapist's office, and Dr. Nikki asks Joe how he knows Beck is cheating. He says he has experience. Joe says he made sure Beck was different, and that if she was cheating, someone must be controlling her. Back to our story, Beck brings a plain glazed donut to Joe as an apology gift, and Joe accepts this, and things seem good for a while until Beck is getting texts like crazy while her and Joe are hanging out. And she's no longer wanting anything sexual with Joe. So Joe goes and looks at her text and sees hearts, so she follows Beck and sees what she'll do. But she finds him.
Are you following me? Answer me right now. Were you following me?
No. I was in the neighborhood. And then I saw you.
God, stop lying.
Like, man, the way his face drops, Penn Badgley is such a good actor, man. I don't think any other actor could have played this role better. I hear Penn's voice in my head as I read the book because he's just such a perfect fit. And I know this is a random moment to praise Penn Badgley, but he is always a fucking win. But this opens up Joe to talk about the sus things that Beck has been doing, like getting spam texted and being late to things. She says he's crazy, and he just flat out asks if she's been sleeping with the therapist, and she says no, and they end it with Beck saying if they don't have trust, they have nothing. And Beck says they're over, and they're done. That's it for Joe and Beck. We cut back to therapy, and in the show, they say this is just happening in one session, but in the book, him and Dr. Nikki talk for weeks. Joe starts going to therapy and really liking Dr. Nikki and dropping his suspicions of Beck cheating just because he's such a nice guy who's been giving him good therapy, which is such a Joe thing to do. But everything with Joe and Dr. Nikki is just one session in the show, and Dr. Nikki says that there's two opposing battles fighting in Joe's head right now, and before their time is up, he leaves him with that to think on. Joe says he doesn't want any more sessions, unlike in the book, and he's looking like he's going to kill Dr. Nikki, but he says he needs full proof, so he diverts to his office, and if he finds proof, he'll handle Dr. Nikki. But he only finds a recording of their session, and they're very professional. And Beck actually says that Joe needs to just let her go in general, and that's what she needs. So Joe sees that as proof that he was wrong about the affair and that Beck was right to end it with him. So he's doing what she wants, letting her go. Starting by breaking her phone he has, so, no more stalking and reading her texts and emails. And then he goes to her house and apologizes about following her and not trusting her about Dr. Nikki, and says goodbye to her, and he's out of there, seemingly doing a good thing for her and him. Then we see Joe back in therapy, so I guess he's back with Dr. Nikki. I guess I just forget that he goes back. Dr. Nikki says Joe is looking for someone who can love him like he deserves. And as he's saying this, he's walking down the hall to see none other than Karen Minty. She asks what happened, and he says he got dumped. And she, they fuck. I gave away that earlier, but she does the I love you thing, and in the show, he goes on Karen's phone while she's in the shower to look at Beck's Instagram. God damn. I mean, shit, that's probably relatable to some of y'all, though. 3 months have passed, and Joe is with Karen Minty, but is still thinking about Beck. But in the show and book, he's happy in therapy, talking about how good Karen is for him, how well things are going with her. She makes him food, organizes his books, and she's freaky as hell. All things Joe wants in a woman. Joe says he doesn't miss Beck, but still Googles her and reads her writing while hanging out with Karen. So how much do you really not miss her? Meanwhile, Beck is hanging out with her friends and talking about her writing. Lynn's had enough of her not thinking about Peach and leaves. Later, Blythe helps Beck unplug and focus on her writing. In the midst of their conversation, Joe is brought up, and Beck asks how he's doing, revealing that she knows he's with Karen now. Joe is also using therapy as intended, still using a fake identity, but talking about his real problems, and Dr. Nikki has to cut him off, saying that the session is over. He's walking home and he sees Beck blocked him, and he starts freaking out that he can't check up on her. On an opposite note, Ethan and Blythe are now moving in together, and it may feel like I just talked about them starting to date, and I did. This is what I meant by in the book where I said their relationship moves very fast. In the show only, Karen is Claudia's nurse, but in the book, no Claudia, so Karen is just in nursing school, and that's why she's wearing scrubs on the subway when they first met in the book. But in the show, Karen, Paco, and Joe are waiting at Joe's apartment for Claudia for dinner, and she comes home high, and she has a problem with using. Karen says that she should put something in her system that isn't pills, and she gets offended, takes Paco, and leaves, basically confirming that she's on something. Karen and Joe decide to get out, and they run into Beck, who clearly wanted them to run into each other, because right after that awkward interaction, she texts him, and now they have text conversations a few times a week. Joe and Beck are both talking to Dr. Nikki about this, and that's honestly crazy. Like, he's got to know this guy Paul is just the Joe Beck is talking about, and that the Ronaldo guy that Paul is talking about is just Beck. But they keep texting, and now Beck is sending pictures, and when they get done, Beck grabs the green pillow, and the emotional cheating has officially begun. Speaking of the green pillow, in the book, Beck tells Dr. Nikki about this green pillow, and he's appalled by it. Joe reads those notes and more from Dr. Nikki's direct logs, and that's how he finds out something later on. But I'm getting ahead of the show. We get an analogy from Dr. Nikki to Beck and Joe in therapy. Beck is a mouse in Joe's house that he built for him and Karen, and Joe has to kill it, aka get her out of his head. Bad wording for Joe. He's gonna take that to heart, but what he really means is stop texting her, while he says to Beck, leave Joe alone.
But in the show only. I think in the book, Joe is way too knee-deep in Karen to be even thinking about Beck.
Show Joe is helping Ethan and Blythe move in, and guess who else is helping? So now they're both there, ignoring what their therapist said and talking to each other, low-key flirting, and they both admit to stalking each other on Facebook, and it's a fucked up moment the way it's kind of cute. No scene like that in the book. Joe just doesn't see Beck until him and Karen. Joe goes home to see Claudia strung out and Karen tending to her. He says they should call the police, but Karen says that she just needs some time off the pills. A detox. And conveniently, Joe has the perfect little detox dungeon. So they bring Claudia to the bookstore and put her in the cage. And while they're getting her in there, she wakes up and starts freaking out.
And he died in this cage. His corpse was right here. I killed him.
I can't imagine having that on my conscience. But he kind of starts freaking out, and Karen calms him down, saying detoxes could get messy. And he says in his head,
Beck. She has no idea how messy this could get.
he's still inner monologuing to Beck, god damn it. Joe then adds to his list of shittiness by lying to Paco, telling him that his mom is at the spa when she really is going through withdrawals in the basement.
Joe goes back down there the next day with ice chips, and Claudia says he's back, not looking at Joe or Karen. Karen says she thinks the place is haunted, maybe by the spirit of Benji?
Crazy what withdrawals make you see. Joe goes back upstairs to Ron coming into the store, asking where Claudia is. He says he doesn't know where she is, and Ron says to call him if he hears from her. And Joe says okay. I probably don't need to tell you that this isn't happening in the book. In fact, there's really just kind of a jump from this to something that happens later, so really nothing in the book to cover right now. Show Joe, meanwhile, is getting a text from Beck asking to meet up while Karen is taking care of Claudia. None of this talking to Beck happens in the book. He just keeps comparing the two of them in his mind and realizing that it's hard to come up with things that he actually likes about Karen versus Beck. In therapy, Joe was given 10 things to say that he likes about Karen, and he would say things like, Karen Minty has a nice ass, Karen Minty is a good fuck. Like, book Joe, stay wildin' the fuck out. Show Joe, meanwhile, is meeting Beck on a boat to read her writing, and while he's there, he gets text from Karen, but that doesn't stop him from literally having sex with Beck on the boat. Oh, and now they're having sex regularly, canceling therapy sessions, telling Dr. Nikki that his advice worked great over a montage of them going crazy. But it's cut short by Joe realizing that he's left Paco alone. He runs home and Paco wants to see his mom. He's not taking no shit from Joe. And this kid's acting is really good.
Mom, you have to get better.
I swore I wasn't gonna get sick again, and then I did. This is it. I'm gonna change.
You can see Joe in the back listening, wishing he got that same chance to talk to his mom after she left him as a kid. And it's like he's hearing it through Paco with the camera being out of focus. And holy shit, this show is good and a show exclusive plotline that I'm really glad that they added. Later on, Karen and Joe go to a party with Ethan and Blythe, and guess who else is there? Guinevere Beck. And they have an awkward interaction all together, but then Joe and Beck are alone, and Beck says that she's not good for him. She's a mess, and he deserves to be with someone perfect for him, which is Karen, and she wishes she did things differently, but she didn't. Joe agrees with this. A few weeks later, they let Claudia out of the cage, and he says they're doing well, him and Karen. Then we hard cut to Joe saying,
It's over.
It goes a similar way in the book, and this is where the book and the show kind of pick back up evening pace. But instead of the apartment, it's out on the stairs of the apartment. Karen has a picnic basket ready for Joe, and he says he doesn't want to go. Karen guesses correctly that he's going to dump her and runs off saying, "Oh, fuck," leaving the picnic basket there, and Book Joe never sees her again. Show Joe ends things, and they have a quick, mature conversation with Karen saying they're both adults and she's not stupid. She saw the signs. She grabs her stuff and leaves, and that's the end of Joe and Karen's relationship in both mediums. Show Joe runs to Beck's house right after this to declare,
You got me, babe!
right before shattering her window with a rock and saying that people should be with who they're supposed to be with, and him and Beck are supposed to be together. And after some convincing, Beck tells him to come up the stairs, and they kiss and get back together. This is for the show only. In the book, nobody knows that Peach is dead because Joe sunk her to the bottom of the ocean by putting rocks in her pockets and dropping her off a dock. But she washed up in Rhode Island, but they still ruled it as a taking of her own life. So now Book Joe gets a call from Beck saying that Peach is dead and they just found her body. And that leads them to talking and eventually getting back together in the book as well. Back to the show, Joe goes home to see a clean Claudia letting Ron in after all of the abuse that she went through from him. She tells Joe that she needs help and can't do this alone. Paco comes down and Joe says he has to help him and Karen, and Paco says Karen is gone. She left. She's mad at Claudia for Ron, and she's not coming back. Later on, Beck is walking around, and Karen runs into her and thanks her for getting Joe away from her, and warns her that he might have done something to Candace, his ex, and if that's true, then imagine what he might do to Beck. Karen says enjoy it while it lasts, and this gets Beck a little concerned. The next episode starts out with a dream from Joe about Candace, but not the wet kind. He has them in the book too. But he wakes up and says her name in both mediums. It seems like she didn't hear it because things are all sunshine and rainbows the next morning. And in the book, this is where he makes the everything shipcake and not for her birthday party. But Joe is being asked about his exes by Beck, and Joe assumes it's because she heard him calling out for Candace the previous night. But Beck starts prying, asking why they broke up, and if he was chasing her the night they met. He answers her questions, but knows there will be more and doesn't want there to be, so he books a therapy session to talk things out about Candace. In both the show and the book, when Joe goes to therapy, we see Dr. Nicky having problems with his wife, and there will be more elaboration of that in the book later. But Dr. Nicky talks to Joe, telling him that if he wants to stop having dreams about his ex, he has to find out the reason he's afraid to face her. And Joe says,
Ah yes, face Candace. I'd sooner slam my nuts in a door.
Then we cut to the story of how Joe and Candace met that we get in the book way closer to the beginning. Candace was part of a band and Joe was helping move some stuff from her van when they got to flirting. She asked them if he wants to come see her perform, and he says he'll be there. And they exchange names, and we cut back to the present where Beck is Googling her. While they're in the cafe, they see this PI that's for the Salingers, aka Peach Salinger. Her family hired him to look into her death. But I don't know why he's watching her friends like one of them did it. Later on, Beck goes to the bookstore to ask Ethan about Candace. And Ethan says he should respect Joe's wishes when he says he doesn't want to talk about Candace. Beck pushes and Ethan says that he was messed up about Candace after it ended. He left town for a week and he came back and wore the same sweatpants for a week. He was all mopey, and then he met Beck and he brought the light back out of him. So Ethan tells her to cut the losses and just let this go. This doesn't happen in the book because Ethan wouldn't have been working at the bookstore long enough to know that in the book. Book Joe just gives us that story through exposition. Back to the show, Joe gives Candace a book for Christmas wearing a Santa hat. It's iconic. I wrote this part of the script actually the day after Christmas, and it's crazy that it lined up like that. I do remember actually writing that part of the script the day after Christmas. I thought it was funny that I wrote that in. And I'm going to put it in the video too. But I don't know, you ever seen Dexter in a Santa hat? Like, top 2, not 2 serial killer right here. Joe brings the book he gave to Candace to the basement in present day to remove the note on the cover that he wrote to Candace. But how does he have the book if... We keep flashing back to see Candace getting a lot of messages while they're hanging out, like Beck was, and Candace saying that it was just her brother. Later, still in Joe's apartment, he's screaming, asking who's Elijah, saying that he knows it's not her brother, and Candace says it's a client and none of his business. Joe says she shouldn't go alone, but she goes anyway. Joe watches her get into a car and make out with another guy. Proof that she's cheating. And in the show and the book, he does the same thing. Back to present day where Beck is looking up Candace and she finds her in a picture with someone that she met with Joe named Maddie Johnson. She's the one who said Candace disappeared so suddenly at that party. Maddie told Beck that they broke up because he found out that she was cheating on her with her record producer, saying that's something Candace would do. Maddie thought that they worked through it, but then she flew off to Italy and ghosted everyone she knew. Her brother would be the only one that she'd keep in contact with, but she ghosted him too, and he's unwell. He has a theory that Candace is dead. Back to the flashback, and Joe is meeting this producer guy on a rooftop to confront him about Candace, and when he does, he said that she didn't even tell him that she had a boyfriend, and he had no idea about Joe, and he's sorry, and you think that'd be fine, right? Joe walks off. So we could get a running start to push this motherfucker clean off the roof. Bro! And symbolically, I guess, he goes up on that same roof present day to get his Candace closure, to say goodbye to her or whatever. Meanwhile, Beck is trying to find out about Candace's twin brother, but he passed away 6 months ago, and the hospital can't get in contact with Candace. Once Beck finds this out, she goes to Joe and asks what happened to her, and saying there's no record of her going to Italy at all. She told Joe to tell her what happened, and Joe shows her pictures on an Instagram under a different account, saying that she changed her name when she left, and that her brother was crazy and doesn't even know what he's talking about when he says Candace is dead. He says he didn't chase Candace to Italy, but he went to take care of the bookstore owner, Ivan Mooney. Then we get another flashback of Joe right after he killed the guy, very shaken up, but he goes to Ivan Mooney, who basically tells him it's okay, and sometimes there are things that need to happen and things that need to be done to some people who deserve it. We cut back to present day, and Ivan Mooney is not in the best of health. He had a stroke recently and now needs help doing most things. He took Joe in, and he was really his only family. And Joe partially blames himself for the condition that he's in because he was so heartbroken over Candace that he didn't tend to Mr. Mooney for 2 days after his stroke. And Beck sympathizes with his story, and the Candace thing seems to be settled for now. Following along with the book for most of this towards the end, I'll let y'all know when it veers off. Beck is still getting texts from the Fox on her phone, which she is saying is Emma Fox from Brown. Joe searched up her social media though, and she doesn't have a friend, Emma Fox from Brown, and he feels like the pattern is repeating itself. And I guess this is as good a time as any to mention 2 things from the book. And one is that this is the time that Joe meets Amy Adam, a girl who he flirts with, but the interaction is short in the bookstore, and they go their separate ways. But for those of you who have watched the show, you know that Amy Adam is a name from season 2. For those of you that don't know, I won't spoil it for you, and I'll just say that he meets a girl named Amy Adam and described her as frisky. She wears a sweatshirt for a college that she doesn't actually go to. Also, what happens next happens in a way in the book, but Dr. Nicky is never confronted directly by Joe like he is in the show. Instead, Book Joe just watches him go through his sad routine of a day, taking his kids to school, arguing with his wife as they walk into their home and to the car, and this shit is invasive as fuck. But he doesn't confront him, and therefore doesn't confirm that she's cheating this way. Speaking of confirming that Beck is cheating, Joe finds Dr. Nicky at night instead of following him all day, and holds a gun to his head and takes his phone. He goes through it and sees the calls to Beck.
Beck.
He goes through their messages and he gets more than proof he probably wanted for his ego, but he hasn't killed Dr. Nicky and lets him go. In the book, he doesn't confront Dr. Nicky to find out that she's cheating, so he doesn't get all angry like this. He says he's gonna ask one more time if she's fucking the therapist, and she finally says yes. And Joe starts losing it, assuming she's never loved him. He goes off, saying, I'll just play it.
It was a lie. It was all a lie. I've done nothing but dote on you, support you,
I know.
love you.
I know, Joe.
And look at what you've done to me. What I did.
Beck says that she's never loved anyone like she loves Joe, and that resets Joe's crazy switch back to regular, so it doesn't matter what she did if she loves him in his mind. They kiss and reconcile, and the goddamn cheating is fucked up in this relationship on all sides. 10 yards. They wake up together the next morning, and Joe leaves to get groceries, leaving Beck at the apartment alone. Paco comes to the door to return the book and said he forgot he left it in the ceiling, saying that Joe said that it was a good place to hide things. And Joe is evidently hiding the box with all of her creepy stolen stuff in the ceiling. Peach and Benji's phones, Benji's teeth, And quite a collector's box, I must say. But I don't know why he keeps souvenirs like this. Like maybe the phones I get so you can maybe pretend that people are alive, but the teeth, man, fuck. In the book, he does keep things of her dead friends, but there's no Paco to tell Beck to look in the ceiling, so Beck just finds the box in a hole in the wall behind the couch, which is his hiding spot in the book. Joe Beck goes through the box and freaks out, rightfully so, instantly trying to leave, but Joe gets back right after she drops the jar of teeth on the floor. Beck stays in the bathroom and tries to quickly clean it up and then leave, but she cuts her hand on the glass and Joe tries to make her stay to clean it up, but she says she's going and Joe blocks the door. And then we cut to when the same type of thing happened with Candace, and we cut back to Beck waking up in the cage. Now let me tell you how the book handles this, because it's way longer and way more violent. You're close to the book and you drop it in the box. The sun is setting and it's almost time to turn on the lights. I step towards you. You flinch and you're hateful, and here we go again. Now you have new names for me, like murderer and killer and liar. I remain tough, focused, like a zookeeper must when the animals turn violent. You don't mean that, I say, calm. You're a twisted fucking stalker, and you don't know what I mean. No, I'm not, I say. No, I'm not. I chase you. I deflect your barbs, and I block when you come at me. It's so easy to grab both of your wrists because you're so little and I'm so strong, and I have no trouble forcing you onto the sofa. You can't fight, and when you promise to be good, which is always, I let go of you and return to my post at the door. You are panting. What's wrong with you? I love you. This isn't love. This is sick. This is our everything ship, I say. Our word. You need help, you say. You are deaf. You are sicko. I would like to be the bigger person, but you call me names, and then I think about your crimes. And Beck basically tries really hard to bargain and reason with Joe, saying that she can get him help. And he grabs her whenever she tries to go for the door. And when she says that he's leaving, he laughs in his head. This is fucking vile. This is all in the book, none of it in the show pretty much. But Book Joe is getting so frustrated with her trying to escape that she says that he'll kill her if she screams. Holds her down, and unfortunately you are lying, and you kick once more, trying to escape. The worst part of being a zookeeper is the moment I have to save the animal from its own emotions, from its wild, illogical nature. You kick and scream, you bite, but your Portman-sized body is no match for mine. Beck, I count to 3. I give you the chance to shut up, but you don't shut up. And after 3, I take your little head in my hand, sorry, and smash it against the wall. Sorry. You are going to be so sorry, too, when you calm down and realize what you made me do. I am lonely in the silence and I kiss your forehead. Clearly you have problems and your menstrual cycle issues are just the tip of the iceberg. What kind of girl climbs into a wall? You can't accept my love when you're this messed up, and you've gone one hell of a way for asking for help. I move fast. You won't be asleep for long. I pack supplies and sling my messenger bag over my shoulder and lift you up and carry you down the stairs and hail a cab. The driver sizes you up and wants to know which hospital, but we're not going to the hospital, Beck. We're going to my shop. This is New York, and the driver doesn't ask questions. Animals know you don't fuck with the zookeeper. And that's how Joe gets Beck in a cab, fully knocked out, and gets her to the bookstore. Yo, hello, what's going on, guys? Basically what happened was I fucking dropped my camera on the lens, and now my lens is broken. That being said, while I could give you iPhone footage for these last 8 pages of the script, I'm going to choose to leave you on an insane cliffhanger and upload this as a separate video on May 12th at 12 p.m. I've just decided this date and time as I'm recording this audio clip, but I'm making this outro short. Just letting you know. I'll see you then.